Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at how one 19th century family took a literally devastating rural scandal and flipped it into an 80-acre American triumph. We're going to trace the absolutely extraordinary journey of James and Hannah Richman. They were an English working-class couple who crossed the Atlantic back in the 1850s with, well, pretty much nothing. But through sheer, undeniable resilience, they forged a legacy that completely transformed their family's trajectory for generations to come.
To really understand this journey, we have to ask ourselves a pretty heavy question. What actually pushes a person to cross a dangerous ocean, knowing full well they'll likely never, ever see their homeland again? You see, in the mid-19th century, emigration wasn't like moving today. It wasn't just packing a moving truck. It was massively expensive, completely fraught with peril, and usually, well, irreversible. Families who made this monumentous choice were basically admitting that their home country no longer offered them a path to prosperity, or sometimes even basic dignity.
So our story begins in rural Wiltshire, England, right around 1821. That's where James Richman was born into this incredibly hardworking family of traditional hand weavers. Growing up during the reign of King George IV, James's whole world was basically the picturesque village of Hilperton. His parents, John and Anne, they were the absolute backbone of rural English society. Sturdy, resilient folks surviving through this dual hustle of weaving and general labor. And remember, this was a society completely defined by strict, unyielding class boundaries.
And right here, we see that the Richman family was literally caught in the middle of an industrial earthquake. Those traditional cottage industries, the ones that had sustained families for generations, were suddenly just being crushed by these massive steam-powered textile mills up in the north. This huge clash between tradition and mechanization, it created widespread economic terror, making the future for young rural families like the Richmans incredibly, incredibly precarious.
Now, what's truly fascinating about this part of the explainer is it highlights the stark lack of opportunity in Victorian England. Formal schooling? That was a luxury mostly reserved for the wealthy. Working-class kids were expected to earn wages, not sit in a classroom. But James, he had this remarkable thirst for knowledge. His first real exposure to literacy was actually at Sunday school. And get this, he had to rely on a hand-copied alphabet just to learn to read. It's such a touching little detail, but it perfectly captures his lifelong determination to self-improve. The real breaking point, though, came in the early 1850s. James was working as a coal merchant laborer, and out of nowhere, he was formally accused of theft along the local canal system. The Avon and Kennet Canal was this vital commercial artery, and yeah, coal theft was a persistent problem. But James, a guy who prided himself on hard work and absolute honesty, suddenly finds himself dragged before local magistrates. He was branded as a suspected thief in the exact same village his family had called home for generations. Just imagine that. Now, even though he was completely cleared by the magistrates, totally innocent, the permanent social stigma and the completely ruined reputation in a small village forced a life-altering choice on him and his wife, Hannah. In a tight-knit community like that, whispered conversations and sidewise glances, they're enough to completely destroy a livelihood. This civil matter was even recorded in the local church vestry book. Talk about a suffocating, toxic environment. James's future employment and honestly his children's social standing were now severely compromised. So you have to understand, emigration wasn't just some casual pursuit of wealth for James. It was a desperate bid for basic dignity. Rather than spend the rest of his life fighting off local suspicion, James made a massive, bold leap. But because the passage was super expensive and Hannah was actually pregnant at the time, James had to travel ahead. He went with Hannah's young brother, Samuel, to lock down employment and housing before bringing the rest of his vulnerable family over. And this timeline shows how the family then had to endure an agonizing, year-long separation. It built so much suspense, right? James spent 30 really rough days at sea in the steerage of the steamship Calhoun. He finally arrives in New York and eventually makes his way up to Rhode Island. Meanwhile, Hannah was left behind in England for over a year, having to prep for one of the most terrifying journeys a mother could possibly face. 6. That represents the grueling 6 weeks and 2 days it took Hannah to make her solo journey from Glasgow, Scotland, all the way across the treacherous Atlantic Ocean. That is a massively long time to be stuck out at sea, and it's even wilder when we consider exactly who she was responsible for during that crossing. Just try to imagine the sheer terror and exhaustion here. She was managing 5 young children, including a baby, in the dark, cramped, poorly ventilated quarters of a mid-19th century cargo ship. Hannah was 32 years old, keeping kids ranging from a newborn up to 7 years old fed, safe, and, from falling off the cargo ship Osprey. And get this, that baby, Emma, was born a full 8 months after James had departed, meaning he had never even met his own daughter yet.
Their emotional reunion in New York in November 1856, well, it marked the beginning of a really profound transformation. The family that had been totally torn apart by economic desperation and scandal was finally, thankfully, back together. They settled initially in the textile mill towns of New England. Out there, James's mechanical aptitude and industrial background made him incredibly valuable. But here's the thing, they didn't just change their geography, they fundamentally changed who they were.
Look at this name change. Going from Richmond to Richmond was a conscious, highly practical strategy. They wanted to sound a bit more refined, fully embrace their new American identity, and basically prevent their children from being held back by a foreign-sounding label. Transitioning to Richmond maintained their English roots, since Richmond is, of course, an established English place name, but it immediately smoothed out their integration into American society. Honestly, it was a brilliant, subtle little step in securing a much better future for their kids.
And James definitely didn't stay at the bottom. By leveraging his English agricultural background and that sharp mechanical aptitude, he steadily, surely climbed the American economic ladder. This sequence right here perfectly maps it out. By 1866, he moved the family to Putnam, Connecticut, actually stepping into management as an engine manager at a woolen mill. He really proved himself to be a reliable, intelligent supervisor, completely rewriting his own narrative from this accused rural laborer back home to a highly respected industrial leader in America. While James transitioned into mill management, the older girls, Louisa, Elizabeth, and Emma, they worked in the Putnam woolen mills to provide some really crucial financial stability. But here's the amazing part. The younger children were actually sent to school. That was an incredible luxury that had been totally denied to James back in England. Because the older family members pooled their incomes, the younger ones got a proper, formal American education. James, the guy who literally had to learn his alphabet from hand-copied notes, made absolutely sure his children could read, learn, and thrive. Then came the fire. When a devastating fire destroyed the Windsor plant where he worked, James didn't just go out and seek another mill job. Nope. Instead, he took a massive, calculated risk. I mean, most people would see their workplace burning to the ground as a catastrophic setback, right? But James, armed with years of careful savings and the steady income from his older children, he actually saw it as a unique window of opportunity to finally claim the greatest American prize of all, 80 acres. He purchased an 80-acre dairy farm in Putnam, Connecticut, achieving the absolute ultimate immigrant triumph, independent land ownership. The man who had been a lowly agricultural worker back in Wiltshire was now the master of a sprawling Connecticut estate. By the 1880 census, he was officially listed as a farmer. This property, which became known as the Richmond home place, secured real, tangible wealth and long-term stability for all of his descendants. The true mastery of their whole hero's journey, though, is proven right here. Just look at how every single child leveraged their parents' massive sacrifice into these incredibly successful, specialized American careers. Thomas and James Jr. became highly respected supervisors in the textile industry. Charles became an expert mechanic over in Hartford. John Henry eventually took over managing that 80-acre farm. And the daughters, they either married into established American families or built really steadfast community roots of their own. The generational leap we're looking at here is just staggering.
And to put that success into perspective, we have this number, 6 hours and 4 minutes. In a jaw-dropping feat of American industrial prowess, James Jr. famously supervised the creation of a complete suit of clothes, literally from shearing the live sheep to actually wearing the finished garment in exactly 6 hours and 4 minutes. No way, right? It wasn't just some cool party trick either. It proved the incredible technical expertise the Richmond family had acquired. It brought widespread industry fame to James Jr., perfectly showing just how far the descendants of traditional English handweavers had evolved in this new mechanized American landscape.
Now here is a really fascinating detail. Even though James became this highly respected community patriarch, the 1900 census officially listed him as an alien. It really highlights a super common immigrant reality of maintaining these deep emotional roots to your homeland. Think about it. He lived in America for over half a century, achieved real wealth, and was known affectionately as Father Richmond in his local Methodist church. Yet he never formally naturalized. It's actually a pretty beautiful reminder that you can fully embrace a brand new world while still keeping a piece of your origin right there close to your heart.
66 years. James and Hannah weathered crushing poverty, a village scandal, a terrifying ocean separation, and all the crazy challenges of a new world, only to remain married for an astonishing 66 years. Hannah eventually passed away in 1911 at age 86, and James followed just a year later at age 91. They were buried together in Putnam, Connecticut. And fascinatingly, actually this is my favorite part, their gravestone bears their original English name, Richman. It's just this final, quiet tribute to the resilient young couple from Wiltshire who started the whole shebang.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to consider how this single family's incredible 19th century gamble still resonates with us today. It proves that sometimes the greatest hardships we face are simply the catalysts for our greatest triumphs. The Richmans didn't just survive an unfair scandal and a harrowing ocean crossing. They used those brutal trials as absolute fuel to completely rewrite their family's destiny. So, I'll leave you with this question. What legacy are you building right now with the tools at your disposal?